Hello there, and welcome to the Power of Integrity podcast. Today's show, we have a wonderful guest, Ena Hull. What a background, what a resume, what a pedigree. When you hear this woman's story, if you're a woman out there who's looking to break ceilings, this is a ceiling breaker and this is a ceiling buster. She is one dynamo of an individual. You'll get that real soon early on in this conversation. I'm delighted to have you on, Ena. And I love for you to tell our audience a little bit about you, what you're doing, what's going on in your life. You've got so many interesting things to tell. And I can't wait for our audience to hear from you. Never mind all the examples that you've been of integrity and how the power of integrity has played a role in your life. But tell us all about Ena Hull.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me today, Ralph. I spent the last 30 plus years of my career in higher education, and it was a wonderful experience, and it still plays a very important part of my life today. I began as a financial aid administrator in the California community college system, and then moved on to go to the private business space with Citibank, and then that led me on into the career college space. So it's been an amazing career. My most recent position, I was a chief operating officer at Legacy Education here in Southern California. And I stepped away from that role about a year and a half ago to go into a portfolio career. And that has been incredible. It was a journey that I was looking forward to do. I didn't know it at the time, but part of that process was to take the gifts, skills, and talents that I have as I went and moved through my career and move it into a space where I could do the work that I enjoy doing the most. So that led me about a year ago to join Tiger 21 as a chair. I started a process of interviewing and being selected as a chair for Newport Beach. And Tiger 21 is a peer-to-peer group for ultra high net worth individuals who are looking to be in a pure and confidential space where they can talk about, complicated issues surrounding having great wealth, whether it's family dynamics, estate planning, investment planning, and so forth. And since then, it's been an incredible journey. We launched our group this fall, and it is still being built out. And I am one of a handful of women who have the opportunity to take this role because we have a little over 100 groups around the world, and a handful of those chair roles are handled by women, and I was selected to handle Newport Beach. So it's really exciting. And when I'm not managing a Tiger role, I'm also doing some advisement work. I'm on a nonprofit board. I'm very involved with a group called the Exceptional Women's Alliance that I've been involved with for a couple of years. And that is for high performing executive C-suite women who want to be in a space. So it's like a Tiger just for women. And that led me into where I am today, doing consulting, advisement work in the private equity world. And I still play an active role in the career college and higher education space today.
And you get very little sleep.
It feels like it sometimes, but little sleep,
Yeah,
but
yes.
on my schedule.
No moss is growing under those feet, that's for sure. You are pounding pavement and moving all the time.
Oh,
What
yeah.
what our audience is most interested in is how integrity has played a role in your life. Do you have an example of some time where integrity was tested and how you had to respond to it, whether it's in this current role or any previous roles? And tell us a little bit about the principle of integrity and its application in your life.
So, well, I can recall an instance where I was tested. In a role that I had in one of the companies, I was responsible for the annual audits for compliance. And this group of schools that I was working with at the point in time, we had worked really, really hard to clean an audit year over year. And when you're in the career college space, it's very highly regulated. And I had worked really hard the prior year to clean up findings and so that we could do it very well. And I had a strong relationship with the auditing firm. And one of the key factors of that is you want to avoid having repeat findings. But in this particular case, if we had a repeat finding in this particular field that had to do with managing cash and cash flows, we could have put on some type of sanctions or restrictions. So it was really critical that we not have a repeat finding. Well, during that audit, when our sample was pulled and there was testing, I discovered that there was a finding, a small finding, but it would have been categorized in that same area. And rather than, looking at that finding, I got ahead of it before I knew that the auditor would find it. They were a great firm. And the question came, do you come up with an excuse or try to cover or mask it and make it look like it's not the finding that I believe that they are? And this was a firm that I worked with for many, many years. Or do you fess up and you fix it and you own it? And I ultimately made the decision that my reputation was on the line, and so was the quality of the institution. And I pulled our auditing firm in, and we talked through that finding. And I explained what occurred with the finding and why I believed it. I thought it fell into that category. And the auditing firm was absolutely amazing because I had worked with them probably 15 years, and they said, Ena, leave it to you to come forward before we even found it, and that you are bringing it to us. And we view this finding in a different category, not for which the category that you believe it may land into, because you are self-disclosing. It is actually a transfer error. It's not a calculation error. And you fixed it 30 days later. So, the fact that you did that, we're not going to classify that as a repeat finding. We're going to put it in a separate category. I have to tell you, that was huge for the company and for myself in terms of the work that we were doing. And that all went back to just doing the right thing and fixing it and explaining the entire situation in advance. And they worked with me and we managed through it. Like I said, it was still ultimately a finding, but it wasn't in the category for which I wanted. And I learned something in that. I learned that the relationship that I had with the auditor made me feel very comfortable in expressing what we had to do to fix it. And more importantly, they were willing to work with me because they too didn't want to harm the organization or their reputation as an auditing firm. And they said, no, we can classify it in this category. And it actually fits the category and for which we're going to flag it. And so they did. That was an example for doing the right thing, not only for myself, but for the young leaders that were reporting up to me at the time, because they knew that there was a finding there as well. And my team was very ecstatic as they watched me navigate that complex situation. And to this day, we still talk about that with some of those individuals that I worked with previously.
Yeah, and I was talking to just another CEO who reminded me of a third CEO where he said, it's amazing. Your people are watching you all the time. Be careful what you do because they are following your lead. And your leadership there shone through brilliantly as to do the right thing, even when no one's looking.
That's the key when they're not looking, right? It's so.
When you were managing folks, how did integrity play a role in your leadership style? And what do you think it did for employee morale?
So, because I had a significant role that led me into the compliance world, my career was built around being integral the entire time, my responsibility. So that helped. But just because you have a responsibility of being a compliance officer for your organization doesn't necessarily mean that the individual is going to keep integrity. But whenever, I was in the education space and a lot of it had to do with student dynamics, or, if our organization made a mistake or we received a complaint, for whatever the case may be, ultimately the core value system was what is in the best interest of the student. If we're going to make a decision on how we're going to handle a situation, I always try to teach our teams that, okay, if it was a student mistake, let's talk through that. Or if it was an institutional mistake, we're going to always fess up and fix it. And that played very, very well. But more importantly, it actually resonated throughout our entire organization. I was a leader. I knew that when you work in what I call the corporate office, if you're in a a multi-location organization, and they always hate it when corporate would come in and visit sites. We had, and I mention this to our teams all the time, whenever you are viewed as coming out of the corporate office, the words that you say and your actions have power, whether you realize it or not. And so be very cognizant about whether or not you are gossiping or you're talking about people that you've worked with. I try to display that we didn't want to do that because it could be hurtful, for our campuses that were reporting up to us, or it actually underlined the integrity of the things that we were talking about. Because if you were caught in something like that, it could be very, very costly into the policies that you set forth into the organization or how you were viewed in training. So it was from a student perspective. It was also our customers. When you're at a corporate setting like that, were not only the students that we served, but the campuses that we served and all the employees that reported up to us, and our actions resonated throughout the organization. So that was really, really important. And it always was in the back of my mind that our eyes were always on us and what we did and how we responded and how we, presented ourselves, whether it was on a call, through written communication, or in an in-person event.
Yeah, in talking to so many of the other guests, the definition of integrity, most folks will hold out honesty, transparency, and a few other words have popped in that surprised me. In fact, our good friend Rick Francie talked about sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sustainable to have integrity? And Wing Lam of Wahoo's Fish Tacos, he spoke about consistency being one of those definitions and one of those synonyms for it. And yeah, being integral or integral to the process and seeing things through to completion and doing the right things when no one else is looking. What a critical, important mode of operation for us. It just shows our character, right? When no one else is looking, we're doing the right thing. And you certainly have been a real model for many people who have followed you. When you think about it, how does it impact, you think, customer loyalty or constituent loyalty? Anyone that's working with the organization when the organization exemplifies integrity.
So there's, the work that we were doing in the education space was huge, right? Because the way we trained and developed our students were a representation and the quality of what the work that we were doing, and how we knew that was the feedback that came back from the employers that were hiring our students. I happened to come out of the nursing education space, and we did allied healthcare work. And so the students were a reflection of who we were. And so when I look back at the decisions that we made, and there were also times whereby we had to exit employees that didn't do the right thing, or we had to exit students who didn't do the right thing, whether it was cheating in the classroom, or we had faculty members who didn't make the right decision. Those were tough calls, and sometimes they were painful calls, but you had to, I hate to say this, sometimes you do have to set the example that there is a zero tolerance in certain things, that we're not going to accept cheating or misrepresenting information to either the students, to ourselves, or to the agencies that were monitoring the work that we did. So ultimately, I think that when you look at the outcome and when an organization is measured by the quality and the work that they do, it comes through a couple of ways. It comes through satisfaction rates that come through your students. It comes through your reaccreditation or your approvals that come back through from the regulatory agencies when they renew your approvals for the maximum approval time versus the minimum approval time. That says a lot. And that means that the organization that's evaluating you, whether it's the state, the federal, or the local community itself, that gets endorsed, and it comes through in multiple ways. So it's reviews. It could be a Yelp review. It could be students who refer. Our best customers and our best students were the ones that came through referrals. So referrals say a lot when somebody is willing to put their own personal reputation on the line and say, I went to this school or I went to this company and I got these services and this is why. And those were our best assets. And that was a big sign of what we were doing the right thing.
Yes. Now, you've probably come across some instances, maybe it's not with you being involved directly, but you've seen this, where the lack of integrity resulted in not so good outcomes. Is there an example or two
Mhm.
that comes to mind you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So early on in my career, I was brought into organizations to basically clean up institutions that had problems. And through that process, I learned a lot. But although I may have gone on and I did the right thing and I set up systems in place after I exited an organization, it was really unfortunate if they didn't stay true to those quality measures. They would get themselves in trouble and either they collapsed, they shut down, or they were acquired by somebody else. And so, unfortunately, the career college industry went through a really difficult time in the I want to say the mid probably 2010 to 2013, 14. There were multiple organizations and institutions that collapsed because they didn't do the right thing, um, or they misrepresented results and outcomes from students, and as a result it tarnished the industry. Fortunately, the institutions that are left standing today and the higher education companies that are still performing and doing great work, that is not by chance. Those are quality schools because it was a really difficult time frame to survive that period of time. It's a highly regulated industry, as much are many industries that are out there.
Yes.
And those institutions that took and did the right thing, they survived.
We're going to, wrap up not too long from now, but I'm curious for the young folks who are developing their style and are weaving their core values even more tightly. What would you share with them? You've had a wonderful journey. You've always been committed to integrity, but what would you tell our young folks in their journey and their application of integrity and other solid characteristics, what they should pay attention to and why they should pay attention to those things?
So, for our young people that are out there, I do have to say that building authentic, real relationships with the people around you is very, very important. And surrounding yourself with the right people and finding once you've established that relationship, especially in the professional world, building the in-person relationship is critical and not necessarily through social media. So we see social media and the technology, a lot of our young people get caught up in that, and so utilizing critical thinking skills. So I think for our young folks is just be cognizant of how much you buy into the social media content that's going back around and what you're reading about individuals. Assume the best and not the worst initially, and be aware that your actions have long standing consequences. So I always like to view myself as a farmer where you're planting seeds and you're watering those seeds, and then someday you'll get a harvest. Being a hunter or having a hunter mentality, that may work in some sales situations, and there are aggressive sales players, but ultimately, I think the hunter mentality of what we have out there with some of our young folks, where you're looking for the quick win, ends up being very costly for you later. And I have found that I have relationships that I've established and I've nurtured those relationships that you just never know in 5, 10 years from now how those relationships will come back. And it's based on having that strong, long-standing, you know, relationship where you're not looking for something today, but someday that relationship, or what I call your social capital, ends up being very, very valuable.
Yes, the farmer mentality, planting seeds, watering, nurturing, and waiting for the crop to be harvested someday down the road. What a great concept for the long ball. Playing the long ball, I've said multiple times, is more important than the short one and the short transaction. And let's face it, 10 it takes 10 to 15 years to become an overnight success, in my opinion.
Right.
It's not a 10 to 15 minute or 10 to 15 month job. That's the rare exception. And for most of us, it might even take 15 or 20 years to have an overnight success happen. But if we stay the course and we keep hoeing that row, ultimately we do find that the harvest will be there for us. You've been a wonderful guest. You are just a delight, and I know people want to get in touch with you, especially the female group in the audience. I'm sure there's a number of men that would love to know more about it, but how do they get in touch with you if they want to follow up with you, Ena?
So the best place is through LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can direct message me through there. If I have the time, I pretty much will talk to anybody because I think relationships are important. I'm very curious to learn about what individuals are working on. So I'm active out there, and feel free to ping me on LinkedIn, and you will see all my contact information out there.
Wonderful. Ena Hull, you're a delight, absolute delight. Let's be sure to catch up soon. Thanks so much for helping our audience understand the power of integrity even better and more clearly. You're a living, breathing example of integrity. Thank you so much.
The information presented in this program is provided for informational purposes only. The information is believed to be reliable, but no guarantee of accuracy is made or implied. Expressions of opinions are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult a legal or tax professional for specific information regarding your individual situation. This information does not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of capital. Ralph Adamo is registered with the securities and are offered through Kovac Securities, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC, 6451 North Federal Highway, Suite 1201, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33308. Telephone number 954-782-4771. Investment advisory services are offered through Kovac Advisors, Inc. Integrity Wealth Management is not affiliated with Kovac Securities, Inc. or Kovac Advisors, Inc.